Hello, Congressman Paul. This is Michael McKay, and I want to thank you for being on our Radio Free Market show.
Thank you. Good to be with you today.
Very good. So our first question today is from someone you know very well, Mr. Joe Seehusen.
Dr. Paul, greetings. Great to have you on Free Market Radio.
Good, Joe.
I guess the first question that's on the mind of millions, I think really tens of millions of people right out of the bat is, are you going to run for president in 2012?
And the absolutely honest answer is, I don't know. I've never ruled it out completely, but it's something I'm not just really overly anxious to do. So it depends on circumstances, and there'll be various things I'd have to look at. So right now, that's about all I can say.
A growing groundswell of support for your candidacy for all the obvious reasons.
Okay. Congressman Paul, this is Michael again. We asked our regular listeners to provide us with questions that are important to them, and the first one comes from a gentleman by the name of Bob Hauger, and his question is, it seems to me that in order for us to be declared a free people, we must have access to the decisions of the Fed. Decisions made in secret that favor the few are contrary to a free people. So now that the Senate has passed the Saunders Amendment 96-0, calling for the one-time audit, what chances would a bookie give that the Congress will force the Fed to open its books?
Well, they're still pretty slim because the Sanders Amendment does help us a little bit because we get information about what they've done in the last 2 years in the bailout. We get more information. We don't know how much the Fed will resist, but believe me, they will resist. The information will not come easily. But it doesn't open up the door to find out what they continuously do on bailing out and helping special friends through the discount window, or what they do with these overseas agreements. So we still have a long way to go, but we made a lot of progress. The final answer as far as what will be in the law is we don't know yet. The Senate passed the Sanders Amendment, which was much weaker than what we passed in the House, and that was my amendment, or the H.R. 1207, which was a true audit, would even audit the gold reserves. So the two bills will have two different versions of this, and unless the House agrees to go along with everything the Senate says and vote on the Senate bill, there has to be a conference, and then the differences will have to be ironed out. But I think the most important thing is that we've gotten the attention of the American people, and they're now looking at the Fed like they've never looked before. So we have two issues. One is, and that is what the audit deals with, and that is, what are they doing, and for whom are they doing it for, and why are they allowed to do it in secret? But the other one is why are they doing it at all? You know, the second question is, why did we ever create a secretive body like the Federal Reserve that allows them to literally counterfeit our currency into the trillions of dollars and do what they want? There's no authorizations, no appropriations, yet they literally can get involved in bailouts like what they're doing now with the Greek bailout. They're back to having these swap arrangements with other central banks, which puts our dollar in jeopardy. And, of course, that's one of the reasons I think that you see the dollar being devalued rather rapidly each day against gold.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that this bill, once it makes its way through conference, will cause, and assuming that it got passed by signed by President Obama, which, by the way, is a separate question, would it cause Fort Knox to be audited?
It should. On the one if it goes with my amendment passes, yes. If the amendment that Sanders passed, probably not. But just to emphasize the importance of knowing whether or not we even have our gold, I'm introducing a bill shortly that will require a specific audit of the gold reserves. So as of now, it wouldn't. And we, the amendment that Sanders passed was passed unanimously. Both leaderships, House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats, agreed to it. And the President agreed to it, and the Fed agreed to it. So you know it's going to be limited in scope, although they've conceded some information to us. Anytime you get that many people agreeing to it, you know it doesn't have the teeth in that we should have.
You know, one of the key things about the Saunders Amendment that I found very fascinating was that the GAO was to determine any conflicts of interest inherent in the current design of the Federal Reserve System. So you've been a long-time observer of the Fed. What would you say is its conflicts of interest that might come to light?
Well, I think the conflict of interest is that they're the lender of last resort and they create the credit at will. That's where the real conflict comes from, and that's where all the moral hazard comes from. But I don't think that's what they're thinking about. They're thinking about, well, could there possibly be a conflict between the Fed and Goldman Sachs, something like that? That's at least what they're implying. Are they specifically treating one country better? Did Goldman Sachs get treated better than Lehman Brothers? But I don't think I'm not that optimistic that all of a sudden, a year from now, we're going to say, "Wow, look at what they did, and look how they treated one versus the other." So the Fed have a lot of tools and tricks that they can play before they will come clean.
Yeah, I've been following very closely the lawsuit that was initiated by Bloomberg and to have the Federal Reserve disclose the $2 trillion that it lent out. And of course, they were ruled against. The Fed was ruled that it had to comply and disclose this back in August of this past year, but they've been fighting it in appeals. Do you think that the Saunders Amendment basically is tantamount to Congress ordering it to come clean on this information by December 1st, as is outlined in the Saunders?
Yeah, I think in many ways it does. If they followed and did exactly what the Saunders Amendment does, it would give the information that those lawsuits were seeking. That is, who immediately benefited in these last 2 years with the Federal Reserve, bailing out these companies. So yes, they would coincide, and even as much good as that lawsuit would do, it still doesn't, deal with some of the things I've been interested in, and that is the agreements with foreign central governments and foreign banks and international financial institutions and what they do at the discount window.
What do you think about an even more assertive audit the Fed legislation passing in the next Congress? Would more Republicans in Congress make it easier to pass a stronger audit legislation?
Well, I wished I could say that, but sometimes you would say, well, will it be easier to get rid of the Department of Education once the Republicans get in charge? We finally got in charge, and nobody remembered Ronald Reagan, who campaigned on that issue. First thing they did in the year 2000 was they changed their platform and said, we no longer want to get rid of the Department of Education. So I shouldn't be critical because every Republican member of Congress, a member of the House, supported my bill, which was very good. I'm not convinced that would have happened if we would have been in charge. Then there would have been a different outcome for that. But I think it should get a little bit better, mainly because the message is very strong that the people want more transparency. They want more independent thinking. And maybe the people will finally be listened to, and that the Republicans will do a better job. So I would say hopefully so, but I don't know if I'd bet the farm on it.
Okay.
Well, let's pick up on that for a minute. What do those who oppose this legislation say? What's really their argument? I mean, one of the things they put forward is that somehow auditing the Fed will undermine its independence. Is that a real threat?
Yeah.
And so why?
Well, I don't think that's just deception. What they're saying is they don't want their secrecy undermined. They don't want us to know how it is politicized already, because the administration and the Federal Reserve work together pretty readily. I mean, do you think the Secretary of the Treasury doesn't deal with the Federal Reserve? And most of the time they have close connections with the big banks and companies like Goldman Sachs. So I think that it's very, very politicized. It's politicized in the sense that Congress has been apathetic about looking into the Fed because the Fed accommodates the Congress. I mean, the Congress can be irresponsible, spend anything that they want on whether it's war or welfare, run up these deficits, and not worry. They might tax some, and then there's a limit, but then they'll borrow some, and then they still need more. But they know the Fed will always come in, buy up the debt, and keep interest rates low. So that's very political. This whole idea that they don't want to because they'll say, well, we don't want Barney Frank setting interest rates because he might keep interest rates too low too long, which is absurd. I mean, first thing is that is what we weren't arguing for. But let's say, how could anybody keep interest rates too low too long more so than they've already been doing? That's how we got into our mess, all through the past decade. And once the crisis hit, what did they do? I couldn't believe it. They could even lower them more. Instead of 1%, they went down to 0.1% and gave a better deal to the bank. So this whole idea that it will be politicized, I think, is just something to try to scare the people and saying this is why you have to keep the Fed secret.
Dr. Paul, I am a small business owner, and the cost of regulation is quite oppressive on my business. You recently sent a letter to your constituents about the Competitive Enterprise Institute's report that compliance to regulations now place a burden on our economy, which consumes over 8% of our GDP, and last year in 2009 cost almost $2 trillion. How can we get this yoke off our necks when it appears to one and all that this burden is growing and not getting smaller? Folks, this is Michael McKay, and you are listening to Radio Free Market. We will be continuing with our exclusive interview with Dr. Ron Paul and his answer to this and several other important questions in just a few minutes. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. And thank you very much for listening.